Hey, what's up, App Mafias? Welcome back to the commute. My name is Tejkuli, and in this video, we're going to go forward and look at these particular topics right here. Now, previously, we have explored functions, data types, and variables. We have done all of that. Let's try to look at these new topics right here and also revise the basics of the previous things that we have learned. Let's try to look at these topics and let's see how it goes. Let's start with operators. Operators are the basic units that we use in our day-to-day lives, like addition, subtractions, logical operators, relational operators. These are all of the basics. So let's try to look at some of the types of operators right here. So according to me, there are three types of operators, like arithmetic operators, simple plus minus, multiplied, modulus, divide functions. And we have some logical operators, for example, or and we have relational operators, simple relational operators that we use nowadays. All these things are used a lot in our day-to-day programming, so they are important to understand. Also, we'll try to introduce a small question that I was asked in an interview and I wasn't able to answer it correctly. Let's try to look at that question as well. So first we will try to declare a simple function called vehicle. Right, now this is a very simple function, right? Vehicle, have I written it wrong? Yes. Yeah. So let's try to make a simple function called vehicle and let's try to print a certain statement here. Right, now we will say the name of the car, right? We'll say the name of the car and the number of tires it has. Like, let's pass it as int. Right, now let's try to say name as, so it will just print name has this many tires, right? Name has 4 tires, for example. So let's try to call this function and let's say it's Mustang, right? And we have tire here, it would be 4, and it will print it as Mustang has 4 tires. Okay, we have previously introduced to the concept of constructors. Hopefully you understand them, and also I've introduced you to the concept of string literals. You're using all of that here in a very simple vehicle function, and it's working well. As you can see, Mustang has 4 tires. Let's try to use a conditional statement here and see. Let's see how it goes. Let's introduce another variables. We'll say car name, right? We have car tires, we have bike tires, also bike name. One thing I want to introduce here is that, as you can see, this is car name, car tires, bike name. As you can see, it is highlighted by green here. Now this is basically a linting error. If I say car name, car C with a small and N with a caps, it does not give me the linting errors anymore. So this is some of the basic typos that we do in our day-to-day programming languages that we need to keep in mind. And these are very important typos because many developers will actually look at the way the variable has been declared and try to see if it is actually a class, if it is actually a function, if it is a small variable. What it is depends upon how we write the variable or how we try to name things. For example, if we try to declare a class here, the starting letter should be in caps. If we try to make it small, it will give us a typo here because name should start with uppercase letter, as you can see. So these are some of the basic typos that we as developers keep in mind. These are the basic conventions that we try to follow. Let's try to use a relational and as well as a conditional statement here just to introduce you to conditional statement. Now I think that you might know if and else statement if you're coming from any other programming language. Car tires are greater than bike tires, then println this is a very basic vehicle function. Let's try to change this constructor here and call this function. Our name will take it as Mustang, right? And we'll say car tires, it will be 4. Bike tires will be 2. Bike name will be Ninja. And when we run this function, it will say Mustang has 4 tires. Let's try to actually increase the number of tires here. And when we run, it will has Ninja has 4 tires. As you can see, it runs this statement instead of this, which means our conditional operator and our conditional statements are actually working. Our relational operators and our conditional statements are actually working. Let's try to add 2 numbers right here. We just did a simple print function which adds the number of cars and bike tires here, and prints vehicles has 7 tires. Simple as that. And we are actually using a simple arithmetic operator here. All of these arithmetic operators and relational operators are clear to you. Let's try to use one of the logical operators here. A very simple function which basically says car tires, if car tires are not equal to 4, car tires are not equal to 4, and bike tires are not equal to 2, it will say it is neither a bike nor a car. Here we can see we have car tires equal to 4, car tires equal to 3, bike tires equal to 4. Let's change that with 4 and 2. It's a bike or a car. Here. So this a simple AND operators and not equal to operator function, and basically checks if the car tires is not equal to 4, it means is this statement true and is this statement true. If both of the statements are true, it will actually print this line. If one of them becomes false, it will not run and print this line. But we can actually remove this and apply a simple OR operator here. Even if one of these conditions become true, it will actually print this statement. OR only checks one of these statements, whereas AND checks both. And hopefully this makes the operators a little clear to you guys. Let's go ahead and look at one of the interview level questions that I was asked. It was a very simple question, but my concepts weren't clear, so I wasn't able to answer that. But hopefully this is an interesting question for any of the Android developers out there. Let's try to answer this particular question. Let's say this is a data class. If you do not know what a data class is a kind of a class which basically allows us to carry data from one portion of the screen to another screen if you want to. Let's say our age is equal to 26. We have this data class called name class, which takes in the name of like a string. Let's try to make an object here. As you can see, Hitesh1 and Hitesh2 both have the same name as Hitesh, but I think these two are two different variables. 2.age is equal to 24. Okay, now the age inside of this particular class, a particular object has changed to 24. That's what we have done. Let's try to print. If we print Hitesh2, Hitesh1 as equal to Hitesh2, what do you think it will say? True. Okay. If we try to say Hitesh1 is triple equal to Hitesh2, what do you think it will say? False. Now, what is actually happening here? Now, if you do not understand what is actually happening here, let's look at this particular operator and this particular operator. As you can see, it is actually 2 equals and this is 3 equals. Okay, and what we are trying to do with 2 equals is basically comparing, and we are actually comparing these two objects when these two objects have the same name. Since these two objects have the same name here, it will actually say true. Why? Because these two are almost the same objects. But if when we try to compare these two objects with a triple equal, these two objects are actually created in these are two different objects created inside the memory. They are not the same object. These are references to different objects. That's why it will actually say false. This equal to actually compares the values. Hitesh1 and Hitesh2 are two different object references. They are not the same object, whereas Hitesh1 and Hitesh2 are two different objects with the same value. That's why it returns true. Hopefully this makes it a little clear. Let's try to look at in this portion right here. This is the confusing part of this data class. Let's try to put it as 26 right now, and it will run. And similarly, it will say false. When we change this thing from 26 to 24, the age factor changes. The Hitesh 2 has a different age as compared to Hitesh 1. Let's try to print it as well. The Hitesh 1 dot age is, and let's print. Now these two are different ages. Then how come when we are comparing the values of the objects, it is actually giving us true? It's basically comparing these two things, not the variables that are declared inside of the class. We're actually comparing the objects that we have created, right? We're not comparing whatever variable that is declared inside of this data class. That's how equal to operator actually works. With triple equal to, we're actually comparing the references. So anyways, it will give you false because Hitesh 1 and Hitesh 2 are two different objects. Hopefully this makes it a little clear, and this is an interesting question that can be asked inside of that can be asked in any interview. Let's try to understand the concept of short circuiting here. We have this particular variable, right? A simple variable called var j is equal to 10, var I is equal to 9. Now we will create another variable called var short circuit, a simple variable, and we say that if j is equal to 10, or operator I plus plus is equal to 10, short circuit will become true. If j is equal to 10 and I plus plus is equal to 10, the short circuit will become true. Now what short circuiting actually does is basically compares. If this is true, we don't need to check this one, right? Because it's an OR operator. If any of these conditions, one of these conditions is true, it will simply execute it. Now, if this is true, we will not even look at this particular part. We'll just say, yes, it's true, short circuit will be true. If this is false, it will look at this particular operator and see if this is true. If this is true, the short circuit will become true. If both conditions are false, it will just say false. Okay, let's look at where j is equal to 10. Var I is equal to 9, right? Now j is equal to 10. It means that it looks at this particular portion of the OR operator and says that it's true. We don't need to look at this particular portion of the OR operator, and it won't even run this thing. Let's try to print what short circuit says. Until in short circuit, it will just say true. It means that both this particular operation is actually true in nature. That's why short circuit becomes true. Let's try to print if I has been updated or not. We can see where I is equal to 9. When we try to compare these two, I and 10, we are updating I with a single I++. I++ simply means we are trying to add 1 inside of the I. We're adding I plus 1 and then assigning it to I again, right? So I plus plus is equal to 10. As you can see, this particular part of the operation is true. It will not even run this, and when we try to print I, we can spot it here. It says 9. When we try to print j, it says 10. It means it ran this particular portion of OR and said this is true and didn't even care about this particular portion. Let's try to change this to 9 and then rerun it. As you can see, it ran this particular portion and said, okay, this is false, right? And then it ran this thing, I++ is equal to 10. And then, as you can see, if I'm trying to print I here, it will actually say 10 here. And then we can look at j here, it says 9. As you can see, this thing. And it will simply put short circuit as false. Now why is short circuit as false when I is equal to 10 already? It basically does is, first of all, it compares these two things, then updates I++. When it compares these two things, it just says false. Why? Because I is 9 and it is not equal to 10. And then it updates with the help of ++ operator. The I becomes 10 and then we try to print it here. That's what it is working. If we try to change it to ++ I, let's see how it reacts. As you can see, it prints out true and the I has been updated to 10. This is how the short circuiting works in any of the languages. I hope this makes short circuiting clear to you. Let's try to look at AND operator. What about AND operator? If this works in OR operator, does this work in AND operator? The answer is no, because if any of these particular conditions are false in case of AND operator, it will just say false, because AND operator basically says both of these conditions should be true. Then I will produce the result of true. If one of these conditions is false, ultimately you produce the result of false. That's what basically AND says. Let's try to say AND here. Now it should produce false, as you can see. And yeah, if this is false, it doesn't even update the thing. Let's try to change j as 10. Now if this condition is true, it will check this condition, and both these conditions are true, then it will say true, as you can see here. If we try to change this to I plus plus, it will compare I to 10 and then update it, and it will say false, as you can see. Let's now talk about conditional statements. We have also looked at if and else statement previously. We'll try to use or operators and operators a little bit here, and try to understand different conditional statements like when and if and else. Let's take the same variables I and j and say if I is greater than j, just print I is greater, else print j is greater. Right, simple as that. As you can see, the answer is j is greater because, yeah, okay, both there's no condition of equal to, that's why it just prints the else statement. As you can see, if I is greater than j, no, it is not the case, both are equal. It will just print this statement, doesn't care what it is printing. Now let's try to produce else if I is equal to j, both are equal, and then we say else println j is greater. Right, let's try to run this thing. Both are equal. As you can see, it just runs else if I is equal to j, and we'll say both are equal. Let's try to update this to 10 and see what happens. I hope this makes conditional statements like if and else a little clear to you, and let's try to use when statement here and see how it functions. If you do not know when statement, it's actually similar to the switch statement, but Kotlin has just when statement. It's similar to if else, if else, if else conditional statements. Let's try to actually convert this if else if into the when statement. We can actually go here and press alt enter, and as you can see, at the last particular portion, it converts it to the when statement. When, a simple when, and then we have two brackets here, and it says I is greater than j, arrow operator, and it simply prints I is greater. And similarly, it follows this convention here, and at the last it will always say, in the case of switch, I think so it's default, last portion will be else. Hopefully this makes conditional statements like when, if and else statements much more clear to you guys. Let's try to also explore ranges inside of the when and if and else statements. Let's see how it works, how these ranges works before we start to look at loops, because ranges are something that we use a lot inside of our loops, like in while or in. Let's get started with that. Let's try to look at that and let's see how it goes. I always take the example of vehicles is equal to 10, right? There are 10 vehicles, and when we say that if vehicles 1 to vehicles in 5, as you can see, the vehicles is out of range from 1 to 5, and we can easily print there are more here. Let's try to make it less than 5. Let's put it as 4. What will happen now? It says there are 5. Simple as that. It just prints there are equal to or less than 5. Okay, here is how the range works. It basically takes this variable and checks if it is in the range of 1 to 5. And if it is true, it prints this, else it will print this. That's how this particular range will work. Ranges are very important. We can also change from this to until. What happens? It does not check the value if the vehicle is equal to 5 or not. Let's try to make it 5, and it will simply print this thing, right? There are more. But if we use a simple dot dot operator, it will also check the 5 value and compare it to the vehicle. They are equal to or less than 5. That's how the comparison works. It's the upside down version of 1 to 5. It basically does it in descending order as compared to ascending order. It counts down from 5 to 1 and checks if the vehicles are 5 there. They're equal to or less than 5. Put it at 6. Let's put it 4. They are equal to or less than 5. That's how these ranges work. And there are many different statements that we can use. With the help of these ranges, we can actually run a for loop, while loop, different kind of loops. Let's try to look at different loops. Let's try to use these ranges. Let's say for I in 0 to vehicles. What happens here is we print I, right? As you can see, we print from 0 to 4. That's how it counts from 0 to the number of vehicles. Let's try to change this thing, and the for loop will run from 0 to number 5, right? From 0 to the range of vehicles, whatever this vehicles range is, it will just print the statement of I. That's how the for loop works. And let's try to use a conditional statement here. If, as you can see, the for loop starts from 0 and it compares it to vehicle, and it says vehicle, there are not, there are not, there are not, there are not, there are not. And the fourth is from 0 to 4. The if conditional statement checks from 0 to 4 and compares it to vehicle and prints that there are not, because the equal to operator is not true. And in the case of the fifth statement, I becomes equal to vehicles, and that's when it produces there are 5 statement in our print command line, right? So that's how ranges work, and that's how we use if and else statement inside of the for loop. Hopefully this makes loops a little more clearer to you. Let's try to use a while loop. Okay, let's try to change it up a bit and use while. While I is less than a vehicle, right? It will start to produce outcomes, right? And it will say I plus plus. As you can see, it runs from 1 2 3 4 5. Yeah, it runs 5 times. And similarly, when I is less than vehicles, because I should always be less than vehicles, then the while loop will run. If the I is equal to vehicle or more than vehicle, the while loop will stop. That's why we are not printing this particular statement. It never happens that the I is equal to the vehicles. Okay, let's try to make it equal here. Now it will print there are 5 in the last statement. As you can see, it runs the while loop 4 times and it does not detect any kind of quality here. But in the last statement, it actually detects that vehicles is equal to I, because it ran 5 times, and that's how the while loop simply works. Let's try to look at do while statement now. Okay, do while and I is less than vehicles, println I. Right, now what happens here is, what's the difference between a do and a while loop, right? So what is the difference between a do while loop and a while loop? That's an interesting question to ask, because what happens here is the do statements, first the do statement runs, it prints whatever the value here is, it prints 0, and then it adds I as plus plus, which becomes, then I becomes 1, right? And then it checks if I is less than vehicles. That's how do while statement works. It first runs the condition, right? It first runs whatever is inside of these brackets, then check if the condition is true or not. That's how the do while loop works. Just the opposite of how while or for loop works. Hopefully this makes do while loop a little more clearer to you. Let's try one more thing. Okay, let's try to make a for loop. We try to actually skip particular steps here, right? 1 2 vehicles, right? And let's try to skip certain steps here, right? Skip certain variables. Step 2. Okay, let's print ln I. Let's see what happens here. What we do is first check from 1, okay, right, and then print I, right? Whatever the 1 value is, right? It starts from 1, that's why it prints 1. Then we go to 2, but since the step 2, it says step 2, it will actually skip second index, then it will go to third, it will print the third, skip the fourth one, then go to the fifth. What basically step 2 does is basically skip the second, every second index inside of this loop. That's how this works. So let's try to check with step 3. As you can see, it first of all starts with I is equal to 1 and it prints I, which is 1, right? Then it steps up with 3 values, which is 1 2 and 3. It skips 2 and 3, then comes up to 4, prints the value, and then goes to 5 6 and 7. It should print 7, but since the vehicles are till 5, the loop exits at the 5th index, and that's why 7 is never printed. Let's try to put it at 8, and let's see how it goes. As you can see, 1, 4, and 7. That's how step actually works inside of our for loop. I hope this makes for loops, while loops, do while loop a little clear to you guys, and that's how these different functions and conditional statements work. Hopefully this makes it much more clear to you guys. Hopefully this makes the basics of Kotlin a little more clear. We'll look at function overloading and different stuff in our upcoming videos. For now, this is it, and I'll see you next time.